Sing for me and I'll let you have my leftovers, the CEO laughed. But the moment she began singing, everything went silent. She had unknowingly sung the exact tune he used to lull his long-lost daughter to sleep. Before we begin, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Let's get into the story. The September night air was filled with the aroma of grilled salmon and fresh bread drifting through the open-air terrace of Chat Laurent, Manhattan's most elite restaurant. Richard Sterling sat by himself at his regular corner seat, the twinkling string lights casting soft shadows over his worn-out face. At age 40, he ruled over a business empire valued at $300 million. But on this particular Tuesday, like every Tuesday for the past 6 years, he sat alone. His phone buzzed again and again with urgent alerts from Sterling Industries, his company. But Richard didn't bother to check any of them. This was his tradition, his weekly effort to remember what it meant to feel like a real person instead of just a machine that produced wealth. He had barely touched his meal when he saw her. A small figure appeared from the dim area between the restaurant's olive trees. She couldn't have been older than 5. Her blonde hair was tangled and unclean, her faded pink dress hanging loosely on her thin frame, clearly worn too many nights on the street. She approached his table with the cautious steps of someone used to being turned away. "Mister," she said softly, barely loud enough to rise above the low hum of the restaurant. "I'm really hungry. Can I have some of your food?" People at other tables turned and stared, their faces filled with either discomfort or sympathy. A waiter quickly rushed over, ready to remove what they saw as an unpleasant interruption to the upscale ambience. But Richard raised his hand, stopping the waiter immediately. "Something in the litters." Richard's hands shook as he grabbed the edge of the table, his knuckles pale against the crisp white cloth. This couldn't be real. There was no way a child living on the streets could possibly know that song. Unless... Sarah finished the tune and looked up at him with innocent eyes, unaware she had just broken down the emotional walls he had built over the years. Her bright blue eyes, Emma's eyes, were filled with a fragile mix of hope and uncertainty as she waited for him to speak. "Where?" Richard's voice faltered. He cleared his throat, trying to collect himself. "Where did you hear that song, Sarah?" She tilted her head slightly, thinking about the question with the seriousness of someone much older than she looked. "I don't know, mister," she answered. I've always known it. It makes me feel safe." As Richard continued looking at Sarah's face, he felt his world shift completely. Everything he believed about his past and his future was now about to change forever. Richard's hands shook as he signed the restaurant bill, his sleek blank pen leaving uneven lines on the soft leather check holder. His mind was racing with thoughts he didn't dare accept, each one filled with pain, hope, and impossible questions. Sarah stood quietly by his table, gently swaying from hunger, still holding her worn-out teddy bear like it was the only stable thing she had. The rest of the diners continued talking, but Richard could feel their side glances, their hushed gossip. A $300 million CEO having a deep talk with a homeless child like she was the most important person in his life. But the moment Sarah sang that melody, Richard Sterling had stopped caring what anyone thought. "Mister, are you all right?" Sarah asked softly, her voice carrying a strange wisdom that hit Richard right in the heart. "You look like you're about to cry. Did I mess up the song?" Richard knelt down so. Their eyes met, ignoring the shocked reactions from nearby guests. Up close, the similarities were even more clear. The same soft bone structure, the same way she tilted her head when thinking, the same little habit of tucking her hair behind her left ear. "Sarah," he said gently, "that song you just sang, where did you learn that tune? That exact way of singing it?" The little girl frowned, her forehead wrinkling through the dirt. "I don't know, mister. It's always been in my head. When I'm scared at night, when Martha locks me in the dark room, I sing it really quietly and pretend someone who loves me is hearing me." "Tell me about these dreams you mentioned," Richard said softly. "Sometimes I dream about a big white house with tall pillars and lots of flowers in the gardens. There's a golden dog that licks my face and sleeps in my bed. And there's a man with dark hair and some silver on the sides who smells like Christmas. He reads to me every night, and calls me his little princess." Every sentence hit Richard like a hammer. His Hampton estate was white, with tall, colonial-style pillars. Max, their golden retriever, had always slept in Emma's bed. He had called Emma his little princess since the day she was born. And yes, he wore cedarwood cologne, the same scent Emma used to say smelled like Christmas. "What else do you remember about this man?" he asked. Sarah shut her eyes and focused. "He has big, strong hands that lift me way up high. He always knows what to say when I wake up from nightmares. He taught me to tie my shoes and ride my bike. Every morning he makes funny faces until I laugh so hard my tummy hurts." Richard could barely swallow. He had taught Emma how to tie her laces, had spent countless Saturdays helping her learn to ride. "Sarah, what do you remember about your real family? From before Martha?" Her face darkened. "Martha says I never had a real family. She says they threw me away like trash because I was too much trouble and asked too many questions. She says they were glad to lose me." Those words hit Richard like fire. Someone had been tearing apart his daughter's memories and replacing them with lies. "But sometimes I think Martha is lying," Sarah said softly, "because in my dreams, the man with the kind eyes is always searching. He looks everywhere, and he's always sad, like he lost something really special." "Sarah," Richard said, voice shaking, "a parent who truly loves their child would never throw them away. Never. If someone took you from your family, it's because that family loved you so much. Losing you would have destroyed them." Tears welled up in Sarah's blue eyes. Emma's eyes. "Do you really think someone might still love me?" she asked. "I know it," Richard replied, "with all my heart." Inside Richard's penthouse, the space somehow felt both empty and full as Sarah stood in the center. Her small figure was dwarfed by the tall ceilings and sparkling chandeliers, but her presence filled the room with both pain and hope. Mrs. Chen, Richard's housekeeper for the last 15 years, appeared calmly, though her concern showed in her eyes. "Mr. Sterling, should I get the guest suite ready?" "Yes, Mrs. Chen," Richard said, "and please contact Dr. Patricia Williams. I need her to come tonight. It's important." As Mrs. Chen took Sarah to get cleaned up, Richard dropped into his leather chair, completely drained. 6 years of hiring private investigators, 6 years of false hope, 6 years of wondering whether his daughter was still alive. "Mr. Richard, Sarah," his voice called from the hallway. "The bathroom has a big white tub like in my dreams, with gold faucets shaped like dolphins." Richard froze. Emma's bathroom at the Hampton estate had an old-fashioned clawfoot tub with dolphin-shaped golden fixtures, a detail never revealed to the public during her disappearance. An hour later, Sarah sat at his dining table, now dressed in clean clothes Mrs. Chen had brought for her. She ate quickly, shoveling down pasta like she hadn't eaten in days. Yet her manners were surprisingly proper, habits from early childhood that hadn't been lost. "Sarah," Richard asked gently, "can you tell me more about Martha? Where have you been staying?" Sarah paused, her fork hovering as tiredness showed in her face. "Martha has red hair and eyes that are always mad. She has a scar right here." Sarah ran her finger down her left cheek. "She moves us around a lot. New apartments, new towns. She says people are always trying to take us away." "Us?" Richard asked. "Are there others?" "Sometimes. Other kids come and go. Martha says not to get attached. I've been with her the longest. She says it's because I'm special, but I think it's because nobody else wants me." Richard's fists tightened. Someone had been breaking his daughter down bit by bit. "What do you remember from before Martha?" Sarah shut her eyes, trying to pull through the pain and confusion. "Just bits and pieces. A man with dark hair who carried me on his shoulders through a big house. He had strong hands, and when he held me, nothing bad could happen. And a golden dog that was my best friend. He licked my face every morning and slept right next to me." Richard's chest tightened. Max had always been at Emma's side. "This man, did he read you stories?" he asked. Sarah's eyes flew open, glowing with memory. "Yes, every night. He had this special chair in my room just for reading. He did the voices, different for each character. When there were dragons, his voice got deep and rumbly, but not really scary. I knew he was pretending. She studied Richard's face with curiosity. You have that same kind of voice, Mr. Richard, the kind that makes little girls feel safe. That night, as Richard gently tucked Sarah into the guest bed, she gazed up at him with an expression that nearly broke him. Mr. Richard, she whispered, in my dreams, the man with the kind eyes is always searching. He never stops. Do you think he's still out there, still trying to find someone? Richard had to clear his throat several times before answering. I know he is, sweetheart. I know he'll never stop looking. Dr. Patricia Williams had earned her reputation working with the most severe cases of childhood trauma. But something about Sarah unsettled her deeply. The signs of deliberate psychological manipulation were obvious, tactics often used by criminal networks to crush a child's spirit. The memory suppression is deep and very calculated, she told Richard after finishing her assessment. This wasn't just random abuse. Someone with expert-level knowledge of conditioning has been systematically erasing her real memories and replacing them with lies. Richard paced behind his desk like a restless predator. Can her memories come back? He asked. Children are incredibly strong. The fact that Sarah is recalling things already means her mind is trying to heal itself now that she feels safe. What kinds of false memories has she been given? Dr. Williams glanced down at her notes, her tone grim. She's been told over and over again that her real family abandoned her because she was broken and not worth loving. It's a textbook method. Destroy the child's identity and then present the abuser as their only source of care. At the same time, Detective Jack Morrison quietly reopened the Emma Sterling case. The initial investigation had gone cold after a few months. No ransom note, no witnesses, no evidence. Emma had simply appeared. Most child abduction cases follow predictable patterns, Morrison told Richard. They involve custody fights, strangers, or trafficking rings. Each leaves behind recognizable clues. But Emma's case, it stood apart. He laid out the old case files across his desk. No ransom note meant it wasn't about money. No family dispute. Your wife had passed away. And trafficking groups don't hold on to one child for years. Richard studied the photos of Emma's room, still exactly as it had been the night she vanished. Then what was this really about? Revenge, Morrison replied. Someone wanted to hurt you in the most personal and painful way possible. That same day, Richard brought in Elena Vasquez, a former FBI profiler known for her expertise in complex child abduction cases. Start from the night Emma vanished, she said, without any delay. Richard recited what he'd said so many times before. A Tuesday night in June. Bath, bedtime story, tucked in at 8:30. Mrs. Chen checked in at 10 honk. Emma was fast asleep. But by morning, she was gone. No signs of a struggle, no break-in, and the security system was working, Elena added from memory. Whoever took her knew exactly how your security worked, your habits, your property layout. So it was someone close, Richard asked. Yes, she confirmed. Someone who either knew you personally or had access to that level of private detail. This was carefully planned over weeks, maybe even months. She showed Richard similar cases. They all follow the same steps: careful strategy, insider knowledge, motivation driven by deep resentment or revenge. I need you to write down every person you've had serious issues with, old business partners, employees you've fired, competitors you've beaten, anyone who thinks you ruined their life. As Richard began listing names, Eleanor added, the good news is, Emma's been alive all to his time. The bad news? This may not be over. In fact, finding Sarah might have been part of their goal. What are you saying? I'm saying plans like this don't usually end with just taking the child. Letting Sarah be found may be a trigger, a next phase. The turning point came on Sarah's fourth night at the penthouse. Richard awoke to the sound of gut-wrenching sobs and found her thrashing violently in the middle of a nightmare, fighting off something invisible. Please don't hurt me, she cried. I won't ask about my daddy again. I promise I'll be good. Sarah, wake up, Richard said, pulling her close. You're safe now. You're here. Nothing can hurt you. She clung to him, still shaking. I had the dream again. The punishment room. The dark place Martha locks me in when I'm bad. She says asking about my real family is the worst thing I can do. Richard's fists tightened. What kind of things did you ask her? I'd ask about the man in my dreams, the one who smells like Christmas and reads me stories, but each time I brought it up, she got meaner. Sarah looked up at him with surprising bravery. Martha told me my parents got rid of me because I asked too many questions, but sometimes I hear her on the phone, talking to someone she calls boss, and she sounds scared, Mr. Richard, really scared. What does she say? Things like, the package is safe, and no one suspects anything. And once when I had a fever, she said something about keeping me alive until he was ready for the final step. Richard felt a cold fear settle into his bones. Sarah wasn't just a hostage. She was a weapon, being held for a future purpose. The next morning, Dr. Williams brought in art materials to try memory recovery through drawing. Draw me the safest place you remember, she said gently. Sarah drew with intense focus. The result made Richard's heart ache. It was a picture of a little girl lying in a soft, frilly bed, surrounded by stuffed animals. A tall man sat nearby, reading from a book. In one corner, a golden dog rested on a round rug. Outside the window were white pillars and flower gardens. This was my real room before the bad people came, Sarah said. The man is reading The Princess and the Dragon, my favorite, and that's Maxie. He used to sleep with me every night. He was my best friend. Richard could hardly breathe. Max had been Emma's loyal protector. What happened to that place? He asked. Sarah's smile faded. Bad people came in the night. A lady with black hair and a man with cold hands who smelled like smoke. They said my daddy was hurt and I had to go help him right away. But it was a trick. They took me in a white van with no windows. When I cried, the woman gave me something that made everything blurry. I woke up with Martha. She said my real family never wanted me again. Do you remember anything else about them? Suddenly, Sarah sat up straighter. The woman kept talking on her phone. She kept saying, "Yes, Mr. Victor, the package is secure." Mr. Victor, Victor Castellanos, Richard's old business partner, his former friend. The same man Richard had publicly destroyed just 2 years before Emma went missing. As it all began to fit together, Richard felt a deep, icy rage take hold. Victor hadn't just taken his daughter, he had broken her down, made her believe no one had ever loved her. But Victor had made one fatal mistake. He hadn't killed Emma. She was still alive, and that meant Richard had a chance to bring her home and punish every person involved. The name Victor Castellanos now hung in the room like a death sentence. Richard sat before Detective Morrison and Elena Vasquez, his expression sharp, as the last pieces of a horrifying mystery locked into place. "You're sure Sarah heard that name?" Morrison asked carefully. "Absolutely sure," Richard replied in a low, dangerous tone. "Victor Castellanos wasn't just my business partner, he was my closest friend for 8 years. We built Sterling Castellanos Industries together from nothing. 2 ambitious men chasing dreams, fueled by pure ambition." Elena opened Victor's file and placed it on the table. Victor Castellanos, age 53. He had been arrested multiple times for fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. His last known location was a compound in the Catskill Mountains, but he had vanished for the last 18 months. "What happened between you two?" Elena asked. Richard's fists clenched tightly. "Victor got greedy. He started stealing money, making shady deals with our competitors, even leaking company secrets. When I found out, I confronted him in private and gave him a chance to fix it, but he refused. He laughed and told me I was a fool if I thought I could control him forever. When I said no to his demands, he tried to take over the company by using stolen data and fake documents." Elena typed quickly, pulling up articles and reports. "So you completely ruined him," she said. "I exposed him for what he was," Richard said, his face hard. "I revealed his theft, his lies, and his attempts to steal our technology. I bought his shares for almost nothing, and made sure every major company knew not to trust him." His tone was ice cold. In 6 months he lost everything: his company, his money, his reputation, and his family. His family? Elena asked. His wife left him and moved to California with their son when the charges started piling up. She said she couldn't stay with a man who betrayed his closest friend. Richard paused. The last time I saw him was in court. He looked at me and swore he'd make me pay for taking away everything he cared about. Detective Morrison was working with the state police. A man willing to spend 6 years mentally torturing a child won't think twice about silencing witnesses. There's something else, Sarah said quietly from the corner of the room. I remember more about that place, the compound. Martha used to take me there when the boss wanted to see me. Eleanor lowered herself to Sarah's level. Can you tell us what you remember? It's like a castle in the mountains, with high stone walls and big metal gates. There are guards with guns and scary dogs. The main house is huge and dark, and everything echoes. And there are other kids there, a lot of them. Richard's stomach dropped. There were kids of all ages, Sarah continued, from little ones to big ones. They were all afraid. No one talked much because talking got you punished. Elena's face turned pale. Did you ever see the boss? The man Martha called Mr. Victor? Sarah nodded slowly, fear flashing in her eyes. A few times. He's tall and thin with grey hair and cold eyes that feel like they see through you. He wears fancy suits, but something about him feels wrong. She gathered her courage. He would look at me and then say things to Martha like, Phase 1 is going perfectly. He's suffering just like we planned. And once I heard him say, when Phase 2 begins, I'll finally fulfill my real purpose. The room fell completely silent as the meaning became clear. He's still planning something, Eleanor said, her voice sharp. Something that only works once Emma is back in your life. Richard stood up, his jaw set with determination. Then we find him, before he starts Phase 2. We break into that compound and save those children. That night, Richard finished the last of his plans. Tomorrow, they would begin the search for Victor Castellanos and his secret mountain hideout. The fight was about to begin, and Richard was ready to win. Inside an old warehouse in Queens, tension filled the air as Richard's rescue team gathered for a final briefing. Detective Morrison had reached out to his contacts in SWAT. Elena had brought in 2 ex-FBI agents trained in tactical rescue. Dr. Williams had arranged trauma counselors for the children they hoped to save. And Richard had sold off $10 million in assets to fund one of the most expensive private rescue missions ever attempted. In the corner, Sarah studied satellite images of Victor's compound like a trained military planner. At just 11 years old, she carried information that could decide the mission's success or failure. There are 3 main buildings, she said, pointing at the photos. The big house in the middle is where Victor lives and holds meetings. The long building on the left is where Martha kept the older kids. The smaller one on the right, she lowered her voice. That's where they put the ones who tried to run. Elena marked all 3 locations on the tactical map. Guard rotations? She asked. 6 guards during the day, 4 at night, Sarah explained. They switch at 8 o'clock p.m. and again at 6 o'clock a.m. The dogs are kept in cages near the front gate, but they let them out if anything happens. Morrison used binoculars to study the perimeter. 20-foot concrete walls with razor wire and sensors every 50 yards. This isn't just a compound. It's a prison meant to trap people inside and keep rescuers out. Richard felt a heavy pressure in his chest. How many kids, Sarah? He asked. Last year I saw maybe 15 or 20, but they don't stay long. Some get sent somewhere else and some... She couldn't finish. The pain in her voice said enough. Dr. Williams gently rested her hand on Sarah's shoulder. You're being very brave, sweetheart. This information will save lives. There's something else, Sarah said, her young face filled with concern. Why, Stor's been planning for something like this. Martha always said he had a plan if anyone ever found us. He calls it his insurance policy. Elena frowned. What kind of insurance policy? I don't know for sure, Sarah replied, but I heard him tell Martha that if Richard Sterling ever got too close, he would start something called Protocol 7, and Martha got really scared when he mentioned it. Richard's heart froze. Victor had spent years preparing for this moment. Every move they made could be expected. We go tonight, Richard announced firmly. He's had 6 years. We won't give him one more day. As the team readied their gear, Richard pulled Sarah aside. Sweetheart, you need to stay here with Dr. Williams. It's too risky. No, Sarah said, her eyes blazing with Emma's familiar fire. Those kids in there are frightened, just like I was. They need someone they know, someone who understands. You need me, Mr. Richard. Richard wanted to say no, to protect her from further pain. But when he looked into her face, he saw the same fierce strength that had once belonged to Emma. You stay close to Elena, he said firmly. If anything goes wrong, you run. Promise me. I promise, she said softly. But please, be careful. Victor isn't just angry, he's totally insane, and crazy people don't think like the rest of us. That night, as darkness crept across the Catskill Mountains, Richard's team loaded into 3 unmarked vans. 30 miles ahead, the compound sat hidden in a remote valley, a place that had become a prison of horror. Tonight, they would either save dozens of lost children and bring Victor to justice, or walk straight into the trap of a calculating madman. Either way, Richard was ready to confront the man who had stolen 6 years of his life and broken his daughter's mind. The war that started with Emma's disappearance was nearing its final chapter, and Richard intended that only one man would walk away from it. The first sign of danger came just 2 miles from the compound. Elena's radio picked up encrypted signals, something that shouldn't exist out there in the wilderness. They know we're coming, she said grimly, adjusting her night goggles. Someone tipped them off. Richard felt a wave of cold fear rise in his chest. Their rescue mission was already compromised. How's that possible, he asked. Only our team knew the plan. Morrison was already giving orders to SWAT reinforcements, but his face was tense. Security teams don't use encrypted radio signals out here unless they're getting ready for a fight. In the back of the first van, Sarah huddled next to Eleanor. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady. Victor always said he had eyes and ears everywhere, she said. He used to brag about knowing things before anyone else did. Eleanor leaned closer. Sarah, think very carefully. Eleanor spoke urgently, her voice sharp. Sarah, did you ever see Victor with any police officers or FBI agents? Anyone working in law enforcement? The girl shut her eyes tightly, focusing hard. I remember one time. Martha took me to a fancy restaurant in the city. Victor was there with a man in a nice suit. He kept checking something, his badge, I think. They were talking about someone named Sterling, and the man said something about watching all the investigations. Richard's fists clenched. Victor had corrupted law enforcement officers. He had turned every attempt Richard made to find Emma into information for her abductor. Every detective hired, every report filed, each step Richard had taken over 6 years had been secretly fed back to the man who took his daughter. We abort, Morrison said firmly. If they know we're coming, this turns into suicide. No, Richard replied, his voice ice cold. Those children have been locked away long enough. We change our plan, but we don't back out. Elena leaned over the tactical maps, studying them again. The original plan relied on surprise. Without that, we have to think like Victor would. He expects a direct attack at the main gate, so we give him something different. What are you suggesting? Morrison asked. We split into 3 groups, Eleanor explained. Morrison leads the loud front attack to pull the guards' attention. I'll take the explosives team to blow open the north wall near the dormitories. And Richard, you go through the secret entrance Sarah told us about. Sarah's eyes widened with sudden realization. The service tunnel. Martha showed it to me once. It connects to the basement of the main house. Victor used it to move kids without anyone seeing. That tunnel is our secret weapon, Elena said. While Victor is distracted by the front attack, you go in quietly and face him. Stop him before he can start Protocol 7. Richard gave a slow nod. After 6 years of chasing, he was finally going to meet Victor face to face. What about Sarah? Morrison asked. She's coming with me, Richard said. The kids won't listen to strangers, but they'll trust her. She's the key to getting them out. As they neared the compound, Richard could see armed men moving behind the walls. Dogs patrolled the perimeter, and searchlights scanned the trees. Victor had truly turned his hideout into a fortress. Remember, Elena said, as the teams prepared to split up, Victor has had years to prepare. He'll have traps, hidden exits, maybe things we haven't considered. Don't let anger blind you, Richard. Your daughter needs you to survive. Sarah grabbed Richard's hand before he disappeared into the tunnel. Mr. Richard, when you see Victor, tell him something for me. What, sweetheart? He asked gently. Her blue eyes shone with fire. Tell him he forgot something really important when he tried to break me. He forgot that I have my daddy's strength, and sterling women don't stay broken. As Richard crawled through the tight service tunnel, her words echoed in his thoughts. She was right. Victor had ignored the power of love, of family, and the bond between a father and his child. But as Richard stepped into the basement of Victor's mansion, he realized his old partner had one last trap waiting. The basement wasn't empty. It was packed with explosives, enough to blow the entire compound sky high. Victor had no intention of running if his revenge plan failed. He planned to destroy everything, everyone. Protocol 7 wasn't just a plan, it was a suicide mission. The explosion at the north wall shook the entire valley. Windows shattered, alarms screamed 20 miles away. Elena's team had succeeded. They had punched a massive hole in Victor's supposedly impenetrable wall. But inside the basement of the main house, Richard could already hear gunfire breaking out in different directions. The rescue had turned into a battlefield, with terrified children trapped between the chaos and their captors. Phase 1 complete, Elena's voice crackled in his earpiece. We've located the children's dormitory, at least 18 kids, aged 5 to 16. But Richard, there's a problem. What kind of problem? He asked. The dormitory is rigged, Elena said. There are motion sensors connected to explosives. If we go in without the deactivation code, the entire building goes up, with the kids inside. Richard felt sick as he climbed the stairs toward Victor's office. His old partner hadn't just set up defenses, he had wired the place to explode the moment someone tried to save the children. They weren't just victims, they were human shields in a madman's final move. At the top of the stairs, Richard entered a luxurious hallway lined with his artwork and silk rugs. The contrast was sickening, elegance on the surface, horror beneath. Victor had built a palace on the pain of innocent children. "Hello, Richard," said a voice behind him. Calm, composed, cultured. Richard turned slowly, his hand moving toward the pistol Elena had given him. Victor Castellanos stood at the far end of the hall. He wore a flawless suit, as though this were a business meeting instead of a war zone. He looked older, his hair completely grey now, his face carved with lines of obsession and hate. But his eyes were still cold and sharp. "You look surprised to see me," Victor said with a smile. "Surely you didn't think I'd run now that my masterpiece is finally playing out." "Let the children go, Victor," Richard said, voice firm. "This is between you and me. Leave them out of it." Victor laughed, sharp and cruel. "Oh, Richard, even after all these years you still don't get it. This was never just about fighting you. This was about ending you." "You've had your revenge," Richard said bitterly. "Emma's been gone 6 years. I've lived with that pain every day. Isn't that enough?" "Enough," Victor growled, face twisting in rage. "You stole everything from me. My company, my money, my name. My own son won't even speak to me. You made me a criminal in the eyes of the world. So I decided to make you feel what true loss really is." Richard kept his distance, watching for any movement or hidden threat. "So you kidnapped my daughter when she was 5. You twisted her mind for 6 years. That's your idea of justice?" Victor's laugh turned darker, more wild. "Justice? No! This isn't justice. This is art. Every piece carefully placed. Every move designed for perfect revenge. Do you know how long I planned her abduction? How many things I had to account for? How much money I paid to buy people in high places?" The truth hit Richard like a punch. "What? You had help, inside help, from the beginning." "Of course," Victor said. "How do you think I knew about your alarm system, your habits, Emma's schedule? Detective Phillips at your local station gave me updates for years. Every move you made, every desperate hope. You were always a step behind." Outside, gunfire drew closer. Morrison's voice barked through the radio. The compound was under siege, but Victor looked calm, untouched by the war happening outside. "You're thinking about the explosives," Victor said, noticing Richard's expression. wondering how you'll save those children without the disarm code. He pulled a small device from his pocket. It looked like a simple remote. "Well, old friend," Victor said with a twisted grin, "I have a proposal for you." "This is the master switch for every explosive in this place," Victor said, holding up the device. "If I press the red button, the whole compound burns. If I press the green one, the dormitory doors unlock safely." "What do you want?" Richard asked, voice tight with dread. Victor's smile was filled with cruelty. "I want you to decide, Richard. Save the other children or save your daughter, because in 10 minutes, a special surprise I've planned for little Emma will begin. She'll learn that her reunion with Daddy was just another part of my masterpiece." Richard felt a chill run through his blood. "What are you saying?" "Sarah is safe. She's with Eleanor near the perimeter." Victor slowly raised a tablet, showing live security footage from around the compound. One screen showed Sarah being led through a side door by a woman with bright red hair and a long scar across her cheek. Martha. Somehow she had survived and managed to sneak into the rescue team. "You see, Richard," Victor said, his voice calm, "sometimes betrayal is worse than death. I had to fake Martha's death so you'd believe the trail was cold. She's been keeping an eye on your penthouse for weeks, waiting for the perfect chance to take back my most precious creation." Richard's thoughts spun wildly as he realized the level of Victor's manipulation. "Where is she taking Sarah?" "To the chapel," Victor said simply. "The most beautiful room in my compound. That's where I've arranged a very special ritual. In 10 minutes, your daughter will finally realize her real role in my masterpiece, unless, of course, you choose to save those other children instead." Victor motioned to the tablet again, now displaying the dormitory full of scared children pressed against the walls. "Make your choice, old friend. You can't save everyone." Richard's hands trembled as he stared at the screens. On one, Sarah, the girl who had endured 6 years of abuse, was walking directly into the final phase of Victor's madness, and Richard couldn't stop it. "You're out of your mind," Richard whispered. Victor's expression stayed cold and satisfied. "Am I? Or am I the only one thinking clearly here?" He moved to the large window, looking out at the chaos in the compound as if it were a show. "You've always been too focused on what's obvious," he said. "You never saw the real art of revenge." "What are you talking about?" Richard asked. Victor turned back, his eyes glowing with a twisted kind of pride. "You think this is about a business rivalry? You think I spent 6 years planning all of this because you beat me in a boardroom?" Something about the way Victor said it made Richard feel sick. "Then what is it about?" "It's about the truth you've been hiding from for 8 years, Victor said, lowering his voice. "The truth about the night Catherine died." Richard froze. Catherine, his ex-wife, Emma's mother, had died in a car crash when Emma was only 2. That night had haunted him ever since. "What does Catherine have to do with any of this?" Victor gave a cruel grin. "She has everything to do with it. Because Catherine didn't die in an accident, Richard. She was murdered. And the man who gave the order is standing right in front of me." "You're insane," Richard said, shaken. "Catherine died when her car went off the bridge in a storm. The police investigated." "They investigated what I paid them to investigate," Victor replied. "Detective Phillips wasn't my first dirty cop, just my most convenient one." Victor pulled out his phone and showed Richard several photos. In them, a younger Victor could be seen meeting a man in mechanic clothes. Cash was exchanged, and the man was clearly tampering with a car's brakes. "Catherine was going to leave you, Richard," Victor said. "She found out about your affairs, your lies, your selfishness, but more importantly, she was going to take Emma with her and make sure you never saw her again." Richard nearly collapsed. "You're lying. Catherine would never—" "She had proof of your cheating, your tax fraud, your shady business deals. She was going to crush you in court and tell Emma what kind of man her father really was." Victor's voice turned fierce. "I couldn't let that happen. You were my business partner. I needed you, so I made sure Catherine's brakes failed on a rainy night." The truth hit Richard like a hammer. You killed my wife. I saved your marriage. I saved your company. I saved your bond with your daughter," Victor replied. "And how did you thank me? You destroyed my life the second I wasn't useful anymore." Richard stared at him in horror. Emma wasn't just a pawn in Victor's revenge. She was living proof of the crime that had started it all. "She's not yours," Richard said. "She's my daughter. The one you gave me only because you murdered her mother." Victor's face glowed with triumph. "Every bedtime story you told her, every hug, every birthday, that was all because I killed for you. You built your happiness on my crime." The sound of distant gunfire grew louder, but Richard barely noticed. His mind was drowning in the horror of Victor's words. "Why are you telling me all this now?" "Because," Victor said, holding up the detonator, "in 5 minutes, Martha is going to tell Emma the exact same story. Your daughter will learn that the man she loves only raised her because his best friend killed her mother." Victor's grin widened. "And then she'll have to choose. Forgive you and die believing love built on murder is worthless, or hate you and live with the guilt of walking away from her father." Richard's vision blurred with anger and pain. "You're a monster. She's just a little girl." "She's the girl I gave you when I took her mother," Victor said, "and now I'm taking her back." Victor stepped forward. "Unless, of course, you'd like to make a trade. Your life for hers." He pointed to the window. "Go on, walk over to that balcony and jump. Die the way Catherine should have died, quick and dramatic. Do that, and I'll let Emma live with the memory that her father loved her enough to die for her." Through the glass, Richard could see the chapel. It was across the compound, heavily guarded, too far away to reach in time. "Or," Victor said, "you can try to save her yourself, fight through my men, risk both your lives, but at least you'll die thinking you were the hero, instead of the man who owed everything to a murder." Richard closed his eyes, overwhelmed by guilt and 6 years of desperate love. Victor was right about one thing. Every joyful moment with Emma had come after Catherine's death. But he was wrong about something else. "You made one mistake," Richard said softly. Victor tilted his head. "And what was that?" Richard opened his eyes. Whatever Victor saw in them made him stumble backward. "You told me the truth about Catherine. And now," Richard said, voice full of steel, "I have nothing left to lose." He lunged. The two men crashed into the office furniture, struggling over the detonator, fighting not just for control, but for the fate of everyone in the compound. Outside, the battle raged on, but inside this room, the true war had begun. The detonator flew across the room as the men slammed into desks and chairs. 8 years of hatred exploded into a brutal fight. Victor, though older and thinner, fought with desperate rage, clawing at Richard's face and throat. "Elena!" Richard shouted into his earpiece. "Sarah's in the chapel. Martha has her." "Copy that," Elena responded, her voice nearly drowned out by gunfire. "But Richard, we've got another problem. The guards are using the children as shields. Every time we get close to the dormitory, they threaten to kill the kids." Richard kneed Victor in the ribs, hearing bones crack. But his old partner managed to grab a letter opener and slash at Richard's arm. Blood soaked through his shirt as he realized this wasn't just about Sarah. It was about saving 20 other innocent children too. Then he saw it, the detonator. It was under a flipped chair. Richard gasped, crawling toward it. "I need the green code." Victor, coughing up blood, still laughed. "You really thought it would be that easy?" Victor sneered. "The green button triggers a separate charge inside the chapel. Pressing it saves the kids but guarantees Emma's death. Press the red button and you destroy the dormitory, maybe giving her a slim chance to escape." Richard's vision blurred with fury and hopelessness. "You're twisted." "I told you, Richard, this is about art," Victor said coldly. "The art of forcing impossible decisions. Just like the one I made 8 years ago, when I chose that Catherine had to die, for the sake of our business." Footsteps echoed in the hall. Victor's guard, as were closing in, drawn by the sound of their leader fighting for his life. Richard had only seconds left before he was overwhelmed. "Elena," he said urgently into his earpiece, "I'm going for Sarah. Whatever happens to me, get those kids out." "Richard, don't," Elena replied quickly. "That's suicide." But Richard was already moving. He grabbed Victor's pistol from the desk drawer and headed for the balcony. The chapel stood 300 yards away across an open courtyard, swarming with guards, attack dogs, and spotlights. Dressed in a torn suit, bleeding, and running out of time, Richard looked more like a man on a final mission than a hero. "For Catherine," he told Victor, backing toward the balcony's edge. "Wait!" Victor coughed, struggling to his feet. Pain and something like regret flickered on his face. "You want the truth? There is no green button code. Both buttons set off explosives. I never meant for anyone to survive this night." Richard stared at him in horror. "Then how do I save them?" "You can't," Victor said, his voice fading. "That's the whole point. I built this so no matter what choice you make, someone you love dies. And you'll live knowing your decision caused it. Unless what?" Victor gave a blood-stained smile. "Unless you're willing to become the monster I always knew you could be." Richard looked down at the gun in his hand, then at the detonator near Victor's feet. His ex-partner had been right about one thing. There was no winning this the traditional way. The setup had been designed to destroy him, no matter which path he took. But Richard Sterling hadn't built a $300 million empire by playing fair. He grabbed the detonator and spoke into his earpiece again. "Elena, listen closely. In 60 seconds, I'm going to trigger the biggest distraction this place has ever seen. When you hear it, move. Get those kids out. Don't stop. Don't look back." "Sir." "Richard, what are you doing?" she asked. "I'm cheating," he said with a grim smile. He was about to use Victor's own tactics against him, a plan so bold it would make his enemy proud and furious at the same time. "Sarah once told me sterling women don't stay broken," he whispered. "Well, sterling men don't play by the rules made to destroy them." He pressed both buttons on the detonator, then hurled the device far away from the building. If Victor's trap was meant to force him to choose, then Richard would refuse to choose at all. The explosion that followed lit the mountain like a rising sun. In the chaos that followed, Richard made his move, running straight toward the chapel, where his daughter waited, trapped between hope and devastation. The final battle had begun. Richard's chest burned with every step as he raced across the courtyard. Shards of concrete and fire rained from the sky. Automatic gunfire blazed in every direction. The chapel stood ahead, glowing through the smoke, its stained glass windows lit like gems under firelight. Behind him, he could hear Elena shouting commands. The rescue team was rushing the children from the blown-open dormitory. His gamble had worked. By destroying Victor's detonator, he had triggered the compound's emergency safety systems, unlocking every sealed door automatically. But Sarah was still in the chapel, still in danger, still about to hear the worst truth of her life. Richard smashed through the chapel doors just as Martha raised a pistol to the back of Sarah's head. The red-haired woman spun around, her scarred face burning with fury. "You're too late, Sterling," she screamed. "She knows now. Your precious little girl knows exactly what kind of man her father really is." Richard's heart cracked as he saw Sarah's face. She sat on the front pew, eyes wide and shining with tears. She had heard everything, about her mother's murder, about Victor's sick game, about Ho. Every moment of love had been built on lies. "Emma," Richard said softly, calling her by her real name for the first time. "Sweetheart, please, let me explain." "My name is Sarah," she cried, tears running down her cheeks. "Emma's daddy would never let someone hurt her mommy. Emma's daddy was good and kind and made her feel safe." Martha laughed cruelly. "You see, she gets it now. The man who raised her was a lie. Everything she believed in, gone." Richard dropped his gun, stepping toward Sarah slowly, hands raised in surrender. "You're right, Emma. I failed your mom. I failed you. Victor killed Catherine because of my selfish choices, because of my mistakes." Sarah's lip quivered, but her voice was strong. "Then why should I trust you now?" The question lingered in the air, heavy like a stone between them. Richard slowly knelt down to Emma's level, ignoring Martha's gun still aimed at his head. "Because," he said gently, "for 6 years, I searched for you every single day. I never gave up hope that you were alive. I never stopped loving you. And the moment I heard you sing our song in that restaurant, my heart remembered what it felt like to be whole again. But You let Victor kill my mommy, Emma said, her voice shaking. I did, Richard whispered, tears rising, and that guilt will stay with me for the rest of my life. His voice cracked as he continued, but Emma, your mother's last words were about you. She made me promise to love you enough for both of us. And even though I failed her in every other way, I kept that promise. Emma looked at him through tear-filled eyes, trying to find something in his face she could believe in. How do I know you won't fail me too? She asked. Richard smiled softly through his tears, remembering their conversation back at the penthouse. Because sterling women don't stay broken, and because you have your mother's strength and your father's stubborn heart. You survived 6 years of pain, and through it all you still had hope. You still believed in love. The emotional reunion is touching, Martha snapped, cutting in, but Victor gave me strict orders about how this ends. She raised her pistol to Richard's head, finger tightening on the trigger. But Emma suddenly stepped forward, placing herself between them. No, she said firmly. Victor's gone. I heard the explosion. His plan is finished, because I choose to forgive. Martha blinked in disbelief. What? My dad made terrible mistakes. People got hurt because of them, Emma said clearly. But he also spent 6 years trying to find me, and when I needed him most, he was there. He gave me love. He gave me a home. Emma turned toward Richard, her face steady and strong. I choose to be Emma Sterling again. I choose my family. Martha's hand trembled as she tried to make sense of what she was hearing. But Victor said you'd hate him after learning the truth. Emma's voice was calm. Victor was wrong about a lot of things. He thought love could be broken by secrets and lies. But real love is stronger than that. Suddenly the sound of sirens echoed through the chapel. Law enforcement had arrived to take control of the compound. Martha looked around in panic, realizing everything was falling apart. This isn't how it was supposed to end, she whispered, her voice hollow. No, Richard said, rising to his feet and pulling Emma into his arms. It's how it was supposed to begin. Later, as the morning sun rose over the Catskill Mountains, Richard and Emma sat quietly on the chapel steps. Around them, families were reuniting with the 19 children rescued that night. Elena worked with social services. Detective Morrison processed the crime scene. Dr. Williams offered comfort and support to the young survivors. Daddy, Emma said, the word coming naturally from her lips for the first time in 6 years. Yes, sweetheart? I'm sorry Victor hurt you so badly. I'm sorry about Mommy, but I'm happy to be home. Richard hugged her closer, feeling something inside him begin to heal. For the first time since that terrible night she disappeared, his heart started to feel whole again. I'm glad you're home too, Emma, he said softly, and I promise you nothing and no one will ever take you away from me again. Together they sat and watched as the sunrise painted the mountains in soft hues of gold and pink. Richard realized then that Victor's final act, unintentional though it was, had been to give them the truth. No more secrets, no more lies, no more guilt weighing down their bond. Now they could begin again, built on honesty, forgiveness, and the unbreakable love between a father and daughter who had fought their way back to each other through impossible odds. The nightmare had ended. The healing had begun,